Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is all the way from the Netherlands. Raven is a cosplayer, seamstress, and model. She first donned her cosplay costumes back in 2009, representing one of my favorite characters, Yuna from Final Fantasy, and she immediately fell in love with cosplay and the cosplay community. She has been making costumes ever since, and she's been improving her craft. She's completely self-taught, and she cosplays as a hobby in addition to her full-time job in the video game industry. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Raven.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so glad that the internet is the tool that it is to bring people from all over the world. Here I am in Orlando, Florida, talking to someone in the Netherlands,
Right?
which is amazing.
Totally.
So, just out of curiosity, what's the weather like in the Netherlands?
Actually, right now, it's pretty good. There's actual sunshine out right now. It's amazing.
It's someplace that I've not been able to travel as much as I've wanted to, and hopefully one day I can, because it would be amazing to get to go to the Netherlands.
It's pretty cool. I've been to the States actually last year, and it's like a different world from here. It's awesome.
What is it about the Netherlands that you love so much? Obviously, you live there, but if you're like saying, come to the Netherlands and see or do
Oh
this.
God. Oh, oof, that is tough. I think what most people are most amazed about when it comes to the Netherlands is actually how flat it is. How
Yeah.
flat
Oh,
everything here is. I think that's pretty accurate.
okay. See, and I in my head, I'm thinking, oh, like hills and valleys and
No. It's all flat. We have
boy,
like
that
one
sounds like a
hill.
few states here. That's like Florida. Florida is flat.
All right, yeah. But with
We're
like not as good weather. The weather's just not as good.
okay. Yeah. So you like I did your introduction. You started off um cosplaying it looks like about 7 years ago
Yep.
as one of my favorite characters in video games, Yuna.
Yes,
Now, are you a big Final Fantasy fan?
I am. I first played Final Fantasy. My first Final Fantasy was actually Final Fantasy X,
Okay.
and I've been playing on Nintendo consoles for over 10 years at that point. And Final Fantasy was my first game with an actual story. Like I know Zelda games have stories, but this was actually story based, and it blew me away.
Right. I know when and I always date myself when I do these podcasts and we're talking about stuff. Like I had the original Nintendo
Right.
and one of my first games was Final Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
And my favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy 2, which is 4 in the Japanese numbering with Cecil and Rydia and Kane.
That is old
And
school, yeah.
that is old school, but ten is my second love.
Oh, really? Oh, that a lot of people don't like that game.
I think a lot of people don't like it for it's really like you are railroaded. You can't really, for the most part of the game, you can't really go where you want to go. You
No.
can't just
You go on a
side
journey.
quest and explore. It's really you're going from point A to
Yeah.
point B and there's no like side stops.
Yeah, true. I actually really like that. It's one of the
I
things
liked
I
it.
liked about that game.
I liked it, and then you do. I mean, after you get the airship, and at a certain point, you can go back
Yeah.
to certain places and do things. But I mean, I really enjoyed it as because it really felt like you weren't getting off track on the main story,
Yeah.
and you really got to just experience it. And I remember like the wedding scene
Oh, yeah.
is one of my favorite of the game because it's just so beautiful and it's
Hmm.
just so filled with emotion and you're like, no, don't jump.
Yeah, don't do it. I like the water scene, the kiss scene. I
Yes.
love that one so much actually that when it came up, my dad was just going to bed and I turned off my console and then I started it again just to show him that scene because to me it was mind blowing the way it looked and with the music and the emotion and I really love that.
Right. And you know what makes me happy is that in the Final Fantasy X game, you can go to that theater
Hmm.
that's in that
Yeah.
main city and be able to watch all of the stuff that you've already gone through.
All those pretty
And
cutscenes.
it's so nice to be able to do that instead of having to like say have to replay the game and the
Yeah.
many hours that you sink into it just to do it
Oh,
again.
I did that anyway. I like that game so much. I really loved 10 and then by the time I went to a fantasy festival in the Netherlands for the first time
Hmm.
and all those people were in costumes and they were all looking so amazing and I thought to myself if I want to dress up how would I dress up and the first thing that came to mind was Yuna from Final Fantasy X too, so I just started cosplaying without really knowing what cosplay was.
Right.
I just went into it because I love 10 so much but I like the outfit of 10 too more.
Okay, I imagine it's the pop star outfit, right?
Just the regular outfit, the one with like the half skirt, the blue half skirt,
Oh,
and with
okay.
the
Yes,
top and the
yes.
hood.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's been a while. I did play 10-2 just briefly. I didn't actually play through the whole game, but the outfits are pretty cool. And I'm glad that they got to bring Riku back because she's another of my favorites from
Yeah,
the Final Fantasy world.
yeah, Riku's awesome.
So, what was it about Final Fantasy X that drew you in? Was it the story? Was it the graphics? Was it a bit of both?
I think a bit of both. I think I was so used to I had a Nintendo Entertainment System NES when I grew up, and then I had a Nintendo 64, and then I had a GameCube, so I grew up playing pretty much exclusively Nintendo games, which was awesome, but it's a very not a lot of them are story based, so I was not used
Right.
to having a story in my game. And my best friend had a PS2, and she had about 100 games. She had so many. And we switched consoles for a week, and she played through The Wind Waker and Super Mario Sunshine, and then she was like, "I'm done with this." And I just didn't want to return that PS2 because I was having too much fun playing all those amazing games. So then I bought one, and I think Final Fantasy X was actually the first game that I bought, and I was so enamored with the style, the cutscenes. I loved how it was Tidus' story, so you follow him, and through him you see this world, you discover this world. You're as clueless as he is,
Hmm.
and I just really liked it, and I loved the costume design. I made Lulu's outfit later because I just loved her so much.
I'm going to ask you a very silly question, but how many belts did it take for you to make a costume like Lulu?
Like not as much as you think, because I made like a skirt underneath from a jean type fabric,
Okay.
and it was actually really stupid. It's actually kind of a funny story, but a friend of mine suggested that I use tie wraps to attach the belt to the underskirt, and I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And I was walking across the con site and by the end of the day, I was like, geez, my legs kind of hurt. I don't know what's going on here. So I took it off. And then I realized that those tie wraps have been like rubbing over my leg the entire time. And I actually have burn wounds on my legs
Oh my
from those tie
goodness.
wraps. And I had to go to the doctor and explain, like, yeah, I was in a leather skirt with a lot of belts all weekend. And now I have burn wounds on my legs. And she was looking at me like I had completely lost it. Which in retrospect was really, really funny. But yeah, that's scarred for. I had scars for like a couple of years actually.
Oh wow. I
Yeah, it
mean
was a
that's
really stupid idea. Don't use tie wraps to attach belts to your costume, people. Please
oh
don't.
goodness. That's something where you'd need to have like a picture and be like, "See, this is what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. I'm
this is
not
why it's not
crazy."
smart. Yeah.
Awesome. Besides Final Fantasy, what other games do you like?
That is always like there's this joke in Scott Pilgrim versus the World where it's like that's a big question, and it's
Right?
generally always my answer because I've been playing for 24 years now, and There are so many games that are in my heart, and there's this thing going around on Twitter where you quote your top 7 games, and I
Okay.
did that, and then I got upset because I missed like a lot of them.
Right.
But off the top of my head, I really love Bloodborne. I like The Witcher, Dragon Age, Final Fantasy, of course. God, Horizon Zero Dawn, of course, but that's still not out yet. I love Bayonetta, The Last of Us. Anything Naughty Dog does is pure gold to me. It's a big question. When
Okay.
I listen to this later, I'll go like, oh, you forgot one
You
or two.
forgot one.
Yeah, or four.
Let me email David really
Yeah.
quick and say, like, can I add some more just so that way I'm not feeling
We
bad?
need to rectify this. This is not okay.
So, how about let's talk about, say, Dragon Age,
Right.
because that is a pretty popular series.
hmm
What is it about that game series that you find yourself drawn to?
It's a couple of things. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of the fighting style that they're using in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not a fan of micromanagement, and it used to be a really micromanagement system, and they changed it up later, which was good for me. But one of the things I really like is the relationships you can start with your companions, like in the Mass Effect series, which are also games that I really love. I also really like the Mass Effect series. But I like how you can have these interpersonal relationships, and I really like the lore of Thetis. I think they have a really elaborate universe there, and I like how inclusive they are too in their relationships. That's a big, big plus for me.
Okay. I did try Dragon Age 2. I tried the demo out
Oh, all
when it
right.
first was out. And my problem is, and I mean, you understand, having played with the original Nintendo, there's an A button and a
hmm
B button.
Right.
I'm very traditional throwback. If you give me too many buttons, I can't really process it.
hmm
I'm not a first person shooter kind of guy.
Right.
I'm not an action RPG, like, say, Legend of Zelda,
hmm
what it's turned into. I'm just not that quick on the trigger. So when I tried the Dragon Age demo, I was like, wow, it's a beautiful game. I'm really enjoying it, except I can't do the combat.
Right.
But I have a lot of friends that love that series so much because of the story and what you
Yeah.
can do in that game.
Yeah, I think Dragon Age 2 is actually, I think it's the least interesting one. I think it's the worst one actually in the series. Just
Okay.
probably because it would probably just have benefited from a lot of extra development time. There's a lot of rehashing of locations. There's a lot of skipping, like you're at one point you're skipping like a large period of time. It all feels like it was rushed, which is
I
a
think
shame.
it was, but I think it was because I remember Dragon Age coming out and it being so popular, and then as like all of a sudden it seemed like Dragon Age 2 was already coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and especially the contrast between the two was so huge because in Dragon Age Origins you could pick like different characters, and the first half an hour to 2 hours I think it was were different for each race that you chose.
Hmm.
And in Dragon Age 2 you were a human named Hawk, and that was it. You could be a boy or a girl, but that was basically it. So there was a lot
Okay.
of those finer details that were missing into, even though they changed the combat, I think for the better. But that's just because I'm not a big fan of the I like my combat more spammy, I guess, in this case than the
Okay.
whole. It was kind of RTS-y, not real
Okay.
RTS, but kind of. And I like how they streamlined that. That was one of the things I actually liked about too.
Okay. Now, going from that game to, say, The Witcher,
hmm
which Witcher 3 just came out, I guess, sometime this year or maybe late last year. I'm not
Last
too
year.
familiar.
Last year, I think.
But
Yeah.
but it's really become like a super popular game.
Yes, finally.
Now, I think I spoke with somebody else and they said that The Witcher originated as a video game in your area, right? Or am
It's
I
from Poland,
mistaken? Okay.
which is it's in Europe as well. So I mean,
Yeah,
in that
it's
way,
it's, it's in that general
it
continent
has it
somewhere
yeah,
over
it
there.
does have a very European vibe to it. And one of the
Oh,
things that's interesting in the last one actually is there's a lot of I think they used a lot of Polish voice actors because there's a lot of names in there that um, there's a character called Dijkstra. They call him Dijkstra, but it's a Dutch name. We'd call him Dijkstra.
okay.
So there's a lot of Dutch sounding names in there, and there's actually a bunch of characters in there with an English accent that sounds remarkably like Dunglish, like a Dutch English accent.
Okay.
So that's really it's interesting. When I walk through the forest in The Witcher, it's like I'm walking through the forest near my home. So that's
That's
pretty cool. I
awesome.
guess it does have a very European vibe to it.
Now, what is the draw to the Witcher series? Have you played all of them, or are you more like just Witcher 3?
I skipped the first. I did play through the second one and I loved it. And then of course I played a lot of The Witcher 3. What is the draw? I like the universe that they've set up. It's kind of fantasy, medieval fantasy-ish. I think Geralt is an amazing character, and the actor who does his voice does it with just the right amount of deadpan delivery that is just he's spot on. That guy is amazing as Geralt. I think the combat I've played a lot of Bloodborne and then I went back to The Witcher and suddenly I was frustrated with the combat while I never was in the past, but it's just because I've been playing too much Bloodborne, which is so smooth and so fast, and compared to that, I think the combat kind of falls flat. But I like the world building they've got there, and what I really like is that they don't hold your hand. There's a really big story, and it's not like sometimes in, for example, BioWare games, you choose between the blue route or the red route. You have the
Mm-hmm.
really good, it's Paragon, or it's, what was the other one again? You have the Paragon and the,
Like Renegade
yeah,
or something?
Renegade, that's what I'm,
Okay.
Paragon and Renegade. And with The Witcher, you choose between crappy and crappier, but you never quite know which. So it's either this is gonna suck or this is gonna suck really bad. And you're not quite sure which is which. There's no definitive happy ending.
Okay.
It's a very realistic world. They don't hold your hand, and the story is very mature. They expect you to pay attention.
Absolutely. And like those kind of games where they have the rich story, the characters, and where they're really just unapologetic of what you're going to do and make it more of like a real type of experience. Those are the games that I really enjoy getting to play instead of the ones where you are always going to have the happy ending.
Right.
Like, sometimes there's not any happy ending, and you're just trying to make the best of what
Hmm.
crap you've been
The
dealt
cards
with.
you've been dealt. Yeah, and I really like that. The choices you make actually, like in The Witcher 2, you have to make a choice in at the end of the first act of the game, you choose who you side with a rebel or with, I guess you'd say, an army man.
Hmm.
And the first half of the second act differs greatly depending on the choice you take. So that's hours of gameplay that is different. It's not just a different color of your power, but it's actually a different route that you're taking, which is
Oh,
something I've always really liked. If you give me a choice, make sure it's meaningful, make sure it's an actual choice that I actually feel like it has some weight to it and that actually changes something.
totally. I mean, and those like I love that we're at that point now and we've been at that point for a while where games like that you can actually branch out and do so many different things,
Yeah.
and the actions that you do, maybe even in that first hour, the first 2 hours, you get to see the repercussions of them later in the game.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are I love getting to do that now.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my favorite things now with modern day gaming, besides obviously having better graphics,
Right.
is the enhancement of having deeper stories.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of narrative in my video games. Like most of the time. Sometimes it's nice to just pick up something and play, but I really enjoy like these hefty RPGs that'll give you 40 hours and a really engaging story.
Right? Like you don't want to put it down. You want to
Yes,
just
I want to know
keep
what
playing.
happens. Yeah.
Now, there's a game you mentioned a few times, and I'm not familiar with it, and it's Bloodborne.
Right. Yes.
What is Bloodborne about?
Bloodborne is a game by From Software, the guys who also made Dark Souls and Demons. I suppose they also made Demon Souls in the past.
Okay.
Um, I was actually I was not interested in that game at all. Because I thought, oh, it's one of those really like Demon Souls, and they're known for being extremely difficult games, which in itself isn't actually correct if you look at it. But they're known as those difficult games that are for the most masochistic of players. Really like to torture themselves playing extremely hard games. So it never quite drew me in, and a friend of mine was obsessed with the game. Like since he bought it, it's all he's played. And he used to play a little bit of everything. And I think he started his new game plus 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 like a week ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and there were so many people obsessed with this game, and I just didn't get it. I just didn't understand why they liked that game so much. So it was on sale on the PlayStation Network, and I was like, well, I might as well try it. And I played it with my friend who is obsessed with the game, and I was just determined to understand why people love this game so much. And it's basically it's an action game, so you're a hunter. You're in a city called Yarnum, and the hunt is on. There are beasts roaming the street, and people are hiding inside. And you get a blood transfusion at the beginning of the game, and then you're told to seek pale blood and end the hunt, and that's basically all you get.
Okay.
So you have to go out into this world, and you quickly realize that everybody who lives in Yharnam is completely insane. Everybody's gone mental. There are beasts roaming the street. There are hordes of villagers out who are slowly turning into beasts. And it's this very horror, gothic, Lovecraftian narrative that is. There's actually a really big story to Bloodborne, but it's presented. You don't get cutscenes, or not a lot of cutscenes anyway. It's not like, so once upon a time this and this happened. You have to find out the story through the locations you visit, the items you get, and you kind of have to piece this narrative together on your own,
Okay.
which is an interesting way of doing it. And the combat is very rewarding. It's a tough game. My main flaw is that I get impatient.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to kill this boss right now, and then he gets 2 hits on me, and then I'm done. It's a game where being patient really pays off, and if you make a mistake, the game will make you pay for it. You
Oh
will
man.
pay.
So
If you make
I
a
hope
mistake, you're done. It's over.
I hope that it's got a lot of save options then.
Not really. You can't pause the game, which is one of the things people really don't like about it. The thing is, you go through the world, and defeating enemies nets you blood echoes, and I think you can kind of equate those to being XP.
Okay.
And when you die, your blood echoes get left there. So if you respawn, you can go back to where you died and pick up your blood echoes, providing you don't die on the way there. So there's a way to get them back. If you're good enough, you can get them back, and then you can use those to level up. But if you
Okay.
lose like 10,000 blood echoes and you die on the way there, then those are gone forever.
Oh, that would be so horrible.
Yeah, it's happened. It happened to me a couple of times, and it's actually, even when I talk about it now, I can understand that people are listening and are like, okay, that does not sound like a game I would play because I don't hate myself like that. And I get that because that is exactly how I felt, but there is something about the combat that is so satisfying that once it clicks, I'm playing through it. I finished the game, which I'm actually ridiculously proud of because I finished what is essentially a pretty hard game. And when I played through it again, I didn't start a new game plus, I just started a new game. And the first boss took me like 20 tries on my first time, maybe even 30. And on my second try, I had it, and this at my second try. The second time I
Awesome.
tried the boss, I killed it. So there's really a sense of progression, and you really feel like you've earned it. Every time you defeat a boss, or you find a shortcut, or you find a new lamp source, sort of like your save point, I guess, you feel like that is your accomplishment. There is no
That
greater
yeah.
feeling than defeating a boss in Bloodborne.
That's something. And is as far as the game mechanics go, is it more like a third person action
Yeah.
shooter type of game? Okay.
Yeah, and they really stress like the Dark Souls games are really, you have a shield and you have to be really careful. You can block attacks. There's not really a shield in Bloodborne. You can parry. And if an enemy hits you, you get a very short window of time where if you hit that enemy back, you'll get some of your health back.
Okay.
So the system is really designed to make you as aggressive as possible, I suppose.
Which is a good thing
Yeah.
because a lot of people do seem to, at least with the certain games that they really play it safe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's nice to see games where it's like you've got to do this and you've got to do it now.
Yeah, you still need to be patient and like find a good window. If you go in arms swinging and not paying any attention, just smacking buttons, you'll get killed within 1.5 seconds. But if you actually pay attention and strike when it's actually clever to strike, then yeah, you can dominate this game.
Awesome. Is there, I know you've got a lot of video games,
Right.
but is there a video game that is just it's in you right now and you're like, I got to talk about this game?
Mm, I am replaying Bayonetta 2 right now because I'm
Okay.
researching it for the next costume that I'm gonna make.
And I think I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTube channel, like the kids play or the teens play, like the React series.
I am familiar with it. I haven't seen a lot of their vids.
I think one of them they just did Bayonetta 2
Oh,
because
really? Oh, I need
that's
to
is
check
that
that
a
out.
that's a is that a Wii exclusive
It's
or
a
a
Wii
Wii
U
U exclusive?
exclusive. Yeah, that's right.
That okay, yes, then they did play it. They
Oh,
played
cool.
the first like I don't know 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh God.
Um, it's it's definitely different
It is.
than what I really know Bayonetta for. Did I imagine you played the first one?
I did. Yeah.
What again? I mean I know that they're the same questions, but what is it about the Bayonetta series that you like? Is it the same kind of action RPG type game?
I like. I do like the combat of Bayonetta. I think it's very. It has a very nice flow to it once you get to grips with it. But I actually really like Bayonetta as a character, and there's a lot of discussion going back and forth. Like, is she a good example of a female character, or is she just a really bad example of a female character? There's a lot of opinions on that.
Right?
And I think she's very empowering. I really like her as a character.
And why is that?
I think it's because she owns who she is. She dresses the way she wants to. She does what she wants, and she's not taking any crap from anybody. And I think that's empowering. I think she's obviously a very sexual character, but she's not someone. She's not easy. She's not. Mm, I don't know. She seems really strong and confident in her abilities and confident in who she is, and I really like that about her. She's not just there to be eye candy. She's actually really good at what she does, which is killing
Awesome.
angels and demons.
Yeah, and that was the thing that they did on that React show. I mean, the
Yeah.
first part of the Wii U game, and it seemed like just over the top
Oh, it's
craziness.
so crazy. Especially in Bayonetta 2, there are a lot of boss fights where you're fighting something and there's like two huge monsters juking it out in the background, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on, but this is awesome.
It's like one of those action movies where you're like, I know something's going on and it's really awesome, but I don't I can't see it
Yeah,
all,
I have
or
no
it's just
idea
too
what's
much
happening,
going
but it
on.
looks amazing. I have no idea what this is, but it's really cool. Yeah, it's
Now,
that vibe. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
okay. And as I mentioned in your intro, you're actually in the video game industry.
I am.
What do you do in the video game industry?
I am a translator. I translate video games into Dutch.
Is there a big market for that? I mean, obviously, if you're
I'm
doing
doing
it,
it. Yeah.
there's a market. So,
I hope there is. Yeah. No. There is. It's not as big as in other countries. There's like we call it EFIX, which is English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish. And for those languages, it's actually obligatory to have every piece of media in the country has to be in that language. So that's why in
Wow.
Germany, pretty much everything is dubbed because that's just a law that they have there. You can't publish your game in Germany if it's not in German.
Okay.
And we don't have that rule here in the Netherlands, and a lot of Dutch people are pretty proficient in English.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's kind of like a service, I suppose, and we are very used to reading subtitles because there are a lot of English and American TV shows that are airing here in the Netherlands, and Dutch people are really used to reading subtitles, and that's not as invasive. So for a lot of publishers, it's just an extra service to provide a Dutch translation.
What is there a game that you've worked on that like is a super popular game in say like the States or elsewhere that you've gotten to work on?
The thing is that there are a couple of games I am allowed to talk about, but I am also very bound by NDAs. And the silly thing is that even once a game is out, I can't tell you if I translated it or not. Um, some games I can, like for example, I worked on Far Cry 4 and Assassin's Creed, not Unity, Syndicate,
Okay.
and Far Cry 3, and a lot of other a lot of other AAA games that I am unfortunately not allowed to talk about.
Oh, that's okay.
So,
But it is cool to know that like you're having a hand in like working on these games and getting to do like even just be a part of them.
yeah, that's
Like
pretty
that's
awesome.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, especially if it's a game I'm interested in personally as well. That is pretty great.
And so we're moving off of video games and we were talking before we started the recording and one of the shows that you are interested in is a Netflix show called Sense8.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of my friends watch it. They've recommended it to me. I haven't gotten around to watching it. What is it about the show that draws you to it?
What I really like about Sense8 is that it features a lot of characters, a lot of different characters that we don't necessarily see in a lot of media. There is a transgender character, there is a lesbian character, there's people of all kinds of colors, sexualities, and genders, and they're all together in this one show. And I think that's really interesting because there aren't a lot of shows that feature such a diverse cast of people. And I think that's really
Definitely.
awesome.
Now, along with those characters, please tell me that it's a good show as far as story goes.
Oh yeah. It's one of those shows where you watch the first episode and when it's done you're like, I have no idea what's going on. It takes a while to really get the ball rolling, but once it does, you can't stop watching. It's very
Okay.
interesting. It's got this very interesting premise to it, and I don't want to give away too much because it's very easy to spoil something like this too soon. But it's one of those shows where you have to just make yourself watch at least one or two episodes so then you finally get a good feel for the show.
Okay. Do you have a favorite character?
Mm, I have a couple. There's a girl from Iceland. There's this Icelandic girl that I really like. I think she's really cool. And there's a bus driver from Africa who's pretty amazing too.
Okay, awesome. When I watch it, I'll have to look for those
Look
two
for
characters.
Jean-Claude. Jean-Claude Van Damme. You'll know what
That's
I mean
fun.
once you've seen it. You will.
Okay. And another thing that you're into, which I led off with, and it's really a hobby, but it's more than a hobby for a lot of people,
Right.
and that is cosplay.
Yeah, I keep reminding myself that officially it's still a hobby. It's taking up all my time. And I'm really like all every minute of spare time is usually spent on either video games or cosplay, but officially it's still a hobby.
And like we talked about, you got into cosplay after Final Fantasy X-2,
Right.
and at your first convention, but now like you're really into like doing cosplay. Some of the work that I've seen on your Instagram page is crazy amazing.
Thank you. Ah, thanks. It's so kind.
So What is it about cosplay that you like that just really brings you in, that draws you in, makes you want to do it?
It's a couple of things. For me, it's like the ultimate tribute to something, because the most costumes that I make take between 2 to 3 months to finish, sometimes four. And that's me just working on it full time next to my job. So they take a lot of time. Some of them take a lot of money. So once I pick a character, it has to be something I'm really passionate about because I'm going to be staring at that character for months at a time
Hmm.
just to get this costume done. And it's just for me, I really like just having something to do, just being creative, creating something, working on something in my workshop for a couple of hours, and then actually having something to show for it, something physical.
Now, I always ask the people who cosplay on this show uh, whether they choose characters that they like or if they're choosing characters based on, say, like the costume
Mm.
more so than the character. And for you, it seems like you pick the characters that you love.
It's actually 50-50.
Okay.
It's the thing. I like having a visual. It has to be visually striking, something that's easily recognizable as a character. Like I don't do, for example, I don't do a lot of so-called closet cosplays.
Okay.
Just characters who walk in regular clothing like jeans and a shirt. Because I like something that is recognizable. I like if it has a certain visual flair. Like, for example, I did Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, and one of the parts I really liked about that was her red hair contrasting with her brown clothing, and then the blue scarf. There were a lot of colors going in with a mostly brown color scheme that I really liked. So part of it is that it has to be visually appealing. But yeah, a large part of it is, do I like this character? Do I like what they stand for? Do I feel something for this character?
Who are the favorites that you've done so far?
Ooh, you mean costume wise or character wise?
Uh, Either. Like, which ones stand out most in your mind? You've completed it, and you're like, "Dang, this was a good costume," and I love the character.
I'm really proud of my Horizon Zero Dawn costume. Mostly because it was the first really, to me, really complicated costume that I tackled. I worked with a lot of real leather and I embroidered it all by hand, and the skirt alone took me about 100 hours to complete.
Woo!
Yeah, it's insane. That costume took between 300 to 400 hours. I stopped counting somewhere along the way just to keep my sanity. Um, I am really proud of that. Part of that is also that the game is developed by Guerrilla Games, and they have this really awesome community team that is really excited about everybody cosplaying, and they're super enthusiastic. And that's a nice motivator to keep you going while you're working on that costume.
Okay.
So Aloy is definitely up there. I think I'm also pretty proud. I finished Flemeth from Dragon Age 2 recently, and I still have some things to fix before I go and do a big photo shoot. But it was my first full armor build, and I'm pretty proud of that.
And do you do everything yourself, or I mean, are there certain pieces where you've got to really outsource and go to
Uh,
someone who does pieces?
No, if I have to, I try to pick when I pick costumes. I particularly, it's like a plus for me if there's something I haven't done before. So it's something I can learn how to do. So with Aloy, it was working with leather. With Bloodborne, it was making an elaborate coat, and with Flemeth, it was making armor. And I really like it if there's a challenge in a costume, if I can learn something new just by doing it. And I am a very perfectionist and stubborn, very, very stubborn person. So I refuse to ask someone else for help. I want to be able to do it myself. I will sometimes ask friends for tips if they've done something before, but I
Right.
always want to do everything myself just because I really want to learn.
That's awesome. I mean, that's something where, and every time I talk to people who do their crafting for their cosplays, and finding out just how much work goes into it.
Oh yeah.
Like I am not a handsy person. My hands don't craft. It doesn't work. Like I can't even really sew a button
Are
onto
you sure
pants
though?
or a
Because
shirt.
I always said that about myself as well, and it's actually just a matter of getting started.
Maybe it's that. Maybe I just have never gotten started, but I've never been a hands-on type of person.
Yeah, that's what I always thought about myself too.
Now, if you're talking to someone and they want to get into cosplaying, what would your advice what would your advice for them be?
I'll go for it. It's so much fun. It's I think cosplay at first it can be kind of intimidating because you see a lot of people in these elaborate costumes, and what a lot of people forget is that these people have been making costumes for years
Right.
and years, and someone's you can't just look at that and go, well, I can never craft that, so I'm not even going to start. You know, we all start somewhere. We all have that crappy first costume that fell apart halfway through the con, and you'll still have so much fun because it's like playing dress up for adults basically, which is
Right.
so much fun.
Absolutely. I think that's always one of the things that it is intimidating is you
Mm.
see all the awesome pictures
Oh
online
yeah.
and or like you go to the conventions and you see the person in the 7 foot tall mech suit or the
Yeah.
power suit
Yeah.
and you're like that'd be so awesome to do, but I that's totally out of my realm of doing anything like that.
And that's what you see, but what you don't see is that that person spent maybe even years on a single costume. Maybe the costume broke down, maybe something went wrong. Um, I always like to, even if things go wrong, I still like to talk about it or share it just because nobody's perfect and nothing ever is perfect. So it's nice to
Mhm.
just, yeah, be real about it. And you can always just start, like when I started cosplay, I did not know how to wear a wig. I thought that was just for very professional cosplayers. Wigs were for professional cosplayers. I had never worked with Warbler, which is a material most cosplayers use to make armor and stuff, because I thought it was super intimidating. And if you just start somewhere, who knows where you end up, you know?
Right, exactly. What's the cosplay community like over in the Netherlands or in Europe in general?
I can't speak for Europe in general because I haven't been cosplaying abroad a lot yet.
Okay.
But in Holland, I think it's not a big community. In America, we in the Netherlands we're kind of behind the times. I think that our first real Comic Con was 1 or 2 years ago, like the first actual Dutch Comic Con. I think that was, yeah, it was 1.5 years ago. And before that, there were like anime conventions and fantasy fairs, which is kind of compare. You can kind of compare that to a Ren fair, I suppose.
Okay.
But there's still like a very slim offering of actual Comic Cons that are not just focused on anime or fantasy alone, but just video games, comics, and everything geeky.
Right.
So it's still a pretty small community, and I know a lot of kids who cosplay are just that kids are very young. But for the most part, for me, I've noticed that it's a very kind and supportive community.
Well, that's good to hear because I know here in America, talking with people, or even in Canada,
Mm.
talking with people, I definitely get the sense of like a closeness. Like everyone's friendly, everyone's super supportive, but then there gets to be times where like maybe with groups of people
Mm.
um that there's different like rivalries and
Oh yeah.
sometimes they're friendly rivalries but sometimes it gets to the not so good part of like not backstabbing but like you hear like I've heard different stories about like not so positive things said like oh this person's costume wasn't as good as like my friend's costume and
Oh yeah, but that happens everywhere. That is a
absolutely with every
universal thing. I mean, I remember when there's always that one person, and sometimes it's a group of people, but it's I think that's universal. I remember my Horizon Zero Dawn cosplay got featured on Kotaku, and which was amazing. But there were a lot of people like, ah, but your Aloy is so much better than hers. Or when someone else gets featured, there are people who are like, oh, but Raven, your Aloy is way better. And I'm like, that's not a compliment. You are not
right.
being kind. You are trying to lift me up by bringing someone else down, and that is not okay.
Absolutely.
And
So you were featured on Kotaku.
I was, yeah.
That's
That
awesome.
was insane. That was crazy. I am really proud
That
of that.
yeah. And going back to what you were saying, yeah, if you like the what people should have learned by this point is if you don't like it, you don't need to comment on it, or you
Right?
don't need to do a
Just shut
backhanded
up and
like,
look the other way.
"Oh, that's good, but."
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. There's still, but I don't even think it's cosplay. I think it's just people in general, where
Mhm.
people feel like they are entitled to say something, and especially if you're in a costume, for some reason there's this twisted reasoning that because you're in a costume, people can say whatever they want about you because you're dressed up, so you're obviously asking for attention, so therefore you're obviously asking for someone's opinion of you, which is
Right.
flawed reasoning at best, but it's an opinion that some people still seem to have, that just because you're in a costume they're allowed to tell you something about it. Or in my case, I get a lot of people who want to check my geek cred,
Oh my
which
goodness.
is, to me, it's hilarious. But I was actually, this weekend I was dressed up as Harley Quinn from Batman Arkham Knight, and there was this dude who came up to me and was like, you totally forgot the tattoo that she has on her cheek. And I was like, that's Suicide Squad, this is Arkham Knight, what are you doing? What are you
Oh,
talking about? Or
I
people, like,
think
if you're in a costume and they're like, yeah, but are you gonna play the game?
right, like, and that's always the thing that kills me is we're not to the we should be beyond that point
Mhm.
of are you really a girl gamer? Like, prove it to
Right?
me. Answer
Yeah,
all of
that.
my
Yes,
questions.
that.
Or like with people that love, say, like the comic books or stuff or
Mhm.
role playing games, they like there's not a quiz. You don't need to give people a
There's
quiz
no
for them to
entrance
prove
exam,
to
right?
you.
Yeah.
Like, be happy that they're involved at all to begin with, because for a long time, women, girls, who, like, however you want to describe it,
Hmm.
they didn't they didn't come out, so to speak, because we as like men were so rude to them to begin with.
Oh yeah, that's part of the reason why I never played games online as a teen, was just because I'd had so many bad experiences on Xbox Live. As soon as someone heard I was a chick,
Yeah, it
there was
just
this
went downhill from
immediate
there, right?
vitriol. Yeah, there was this immediate harsh response, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna turn off my mic now.
Right. Like, it's almost easier, and it's sad.
It
It's
is.
easier to just play the game without having that interaction than suffering through it to
Hmm.
get the full
Right.
experience.
And even though I mean, I've been gaming for 24 years. I've been working in the industry for 5. I can tell that it's getting better.
Mhm.
But there's still, whenever I go to an explicit gaming convention, or I walked at Gamescom last year on the press in the industry day, I got catcalled on the
Oh my
show
goodness.
floor. Like, for real, I was there for my job and I got catcalled. And I was like, "What are you doing, dude? Why? Why
That
are
is
you doing
so
this?"
ridiculous.
It was kind of crazy, and it's funny to me when I go buy a video game. Not when I go to like a video game store, but we don't have a lot of those here. So when I go to like a general toy store, they also sell video games.
Mhm.
It's always like, ah, should I wrap it for you? I'm like, no, it's just for me, and they give me this weird look,
Oh
just this
no.
full-on stare. Like, really? It's I laugh about it. Sometimes it's really funny. It's getting better. It's getting better. It's not all terrible. I mean, it's getting a lot better, but it's still not where it should be.
Right. Like, there shouldn't be like, especially with the online interactions, and I know that it got worse. Like, it's been bad for certain people, especially in the games industry,
Right? Yeah.
recently, and it's it feels like it's going to still be bad until it gets better. But, like, especially in America, with the way that everything is and the opinions that people have, they're so set in it, and they're not willing to look past what they've known for 20 or 30 years of, oh, video games are for guys, and stop trying to put your like feminist stuff in my video game, and it's
Yeah.
like, are you kidding me at this point? Like,
It's so funny though, because a lot of girls have been playing these games, even though they were technically marketed towards guys. I can only speak for myself, but I wouldn't want a game that is specifically catered towards or designed for girls, because I've been playing a lot of games and I really like those games. But it's the same people who
absolutely.
complain about there being homosexual relationships in, for example, Dragon Age that are completely optional. You can ignore it. You never have to see it, but they still get upset because it's in their game. And how dare they put a non-straight relationship in their game?
I know they just
Oh,
can't,
the nerve,
abide it. Like,
right?
if you don't want it, don't click the buttons to
Don't
make it
play it.
happen.
Don't romance that character, and it's fine. It's optional content. It's cool. Yeah,
Oh my goodness. We can only hope that, in like another 20 years or so, maybe things will be better where people just won't care. Like, haven't we hit the point of there's more important things than
right. I think it's happening. It's already like parts of it. Sometimes there are things happening where I'm like, oh, that's great, and we're taking a lot of steps forward. And then, for example, there's this big festival in the Netherlands that is, it's kind of, I was gonna say our E3, but that's giving it way too much credit. It's like a video game festival where you can play games that haven't been released yet on the show floor, but it's here in Holland, so it's super small, and most people
Okay.
laugh at it. But it's not that big, and like a lot of conventions and events like this, they banned booth babes a couple of years ago just because a lot of people agreed that it was not a very inclusive practice. That was maybe not the best for the industry, and they were actually polling their Facebook page a couple of weeks back if they should bring it back, if they should bring
Absolutely.
booth babes back.
And the answer should be no.
Let's not. But apparently there were a lot of people who were really excited about that, and it's stuff like that that makes me realize that this is actually still a very relevant discussion.
Here's the thing. If they want, if it was me, if I'm going to have somebody dressed up, hopefully representing the characters of the game,
Mm,
I would do what I did for several guests on this podcast, is go find people that are into the game,
yeah,
that dress up, that can actually talk about the game to you or to your
right.
customers.
Use cosplayers at your booth. They're the most passionate, creative people, outgoing usually, that you'll ever meet. And they also look really pretty, but they know stuff.
Right, like they can actually hold a conversation and tell you all about
Right.
why you should play the game.
Uh-huh. It's not about there being pretty people at a booth, and it's not about, oh, we'll put some naked guys in there too, because that's equally as uncomfortable. That's not what it's about. It's just about sending the message to a lot of people that this is not their event, that this is not meant for them.
Uh, just just we
Right?
yeah. There's not much, like, we could talk all day about this,
Oh yeah, I
and
didn't mean to bring you down. I'm sorry.
oh no, it's okay. It is okay. Like, I like having these discussions. I have a podcast coming out at the, think it's in the middle or end of this month, August, with a guy named Trent. And Trent cosplays. He's an African American, but he cosplays as Batman
Oh, cool.
and as like different Power Rangers. And he was telling me, on the podcast, about how he gets certain reactions from people because he is not the correct color
Oh,
for those characters.
oh.
And it's like, can't we just get to the point where people can just do what they enjoy doing without having somebody just saying things like that?
Can't
Like,
we just be decent human beings?
right.
Yeah, I really, a big part of me, I actually started I was really nervous about starting my cosplay page, like going public with my cosplays, because I was nervous about the way people would react. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is promoting that everybody can cosplay and that it doesn't matter what you look like, what your gender identity is, what your sexuality is, or your skin color, or your weight, or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you like a character, you can dress up as that character. And
Absolutely.
it's usually the people saying bad stuff that always says a lot about that person. It does not say anything about you directly. It's just really telling about that person and where they are at that point in their lives, which is not a very good place, which is why they feel the need to lash out.
Yep. What a crazy time.
There's still a lot of amazing people that are really latching on to this message, which is good, but it's still something that has to be said.
Absolutely. And say it again and again until
exactly.
It becomes...
I will keep on repeating it until they get really sick of me.
There you go. So where can people find you on the realm of social media if they want to follow you?
On the World Wide Web. Well, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and my username for both is Raven Star Cosplay.
Okay. That's easy enough.
That's easy, yes.
So, Raven, from the Netherlands, I want to thank you so much for making the time to record with me for this podcast. It has been tremendously fun.
Thank you so much. I am honored. Thank you for having me. Thanks again.
Oh, you are welcome.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.